Jason Mobley. We catch up for the first time. I think it's interesting how in these days you can make a LinkedIn connection with someone and suddenly you're messaging and you're finding your kindred spirits in some ways, and before long you want to take that to getting to know each other. So that's how we've come to this point in time. I think it's a cool commentary on social networking these days.
Well, I like the fact that LinkedIn provides you with a different type of social networking. You know, it's more to the point. It's the type of content you want to see, because other social media platforms, you see everything that everyone shares, but you know, you can kind of fine tune that with LinkedIn. So for those of us on the UC platforms, it's mainly what you see in your feed, and then you can follow them. But I've made a lot of friends on LinkedIn, and I've used it to help me push out more commentary on products and my experience with that, because I found a few months ago that I made a post about my Zoom lab deployment. And when I did, you know, I said something to the effect of, this was the easiest thing I've ever set up. It was, you know, fluid and flawless, and in a few days, I realized that post went viral. And I didn't mean for that to happen. It was just more about, you know, and then I thought to myself, I said, you know, I do a lot of testing on UC equipment, cameras and Zoom rooms and all the different microphones and headsets and all these things. It's for my own edification.
Sure.
But there's no one really on LinkedIn doing reviews. And, you know, I notice on the personal market, people review guns and hobbies and cars and all these different things. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to start a channel, and I named it the UC Guru. I've literally every day of my life, I have a package at the door. Like today, I had 4 Abra cameras that I'm going to start testing. I did a review on the EP65 yesterday. I've got the Avacor to do next. And then now I'm getting into the software side, like with Zoe Meet. They have an AI platform on Zoom that's really, really neat. So for as long as I can, I'm going to do probably one review a week.
I think it's fascinating because you're literally an educator by trade, but you're a technologist by trade. And you're kind of combining that learning aspect, that discovery aspect, that actually trait that you have into, you know, this deep diving into somewhat of a super user in the Zoom area in particular, but in some ways an advocate, but in other ways trying to be a reliable source of a true, a tried and tested experimenter of sorts, or at least a reference point for folks to rely on your viewpoint. And for us, I thought it was really good because it's breaking some of that user provider wall down so that there's a feedback and that we can rely on that.
Well, you know what I find is customers want to hear from customers sometimes. But anytime I've ever bought a product, even with Zoom, I said, okay, give me names of other universities that are using this. And I want to contact them and I want to ask them, because I want to know the good, the bad, the ugly, right? I want to know, is there technical issues you have that they're not going to tell you about? Because those things need to be uncovered. So the good thing that I've found in these products is there's not a lot of ugly. More so what I find is features that I'd like to see. And so kind of how I present that is, in future iterations of this product, I'd like to see this. Maybe that's on their roadmap, maybe it's not, but at least they hear a customer's perspective on how to make the product better. And one quest I have right now is twofold. I want to find what I would define as the perfect conference room setup. Now I get that you have huddle room sizes and different other configurations, but those kind of appeal to the software development side, smaller room size, but good 8 to 12 size conference room. And then I'm also designing the perfect classroom. And what I mean by the perfect classroom is what's the right equipment to build it. So I've built about 21 different Zoom rooms lately, and every time that I do, I change the equipment. I have a different camera setup. I might use an Aver, I might use a Poly, I might use a Logitech, but I want to test the different ones. And then once I find the perfect configuration, then moving forward, I'm rolling that out as the standard. And you use features like speaker track and automatic framing on cameras and all these things that create a better user experience. That's really what I'm looking for.
Yeah, I think it's great that you're helping other users actually come up the learning curve a little faster. As I go through EDUCAUSE site, EdSurge, and some of these education technologist organizations, there still seems to be quite a bit of consternation, confusion, inability to truly get a clear idea of how to build a platform out, since a lot of this was suddenly thrust on people. How is your university adjusting to the situation?
Well, luckily we had a little forethought in all of this, where we were primarily a Cisco house for years. We, in pharmacy, we have close to 30 different endpoints where we teach Tallahassee to Crestview, Tampa, Davie, and Jacksonville. So we'll do Cisco Telepresence and TCS and BBRIC and all those different platforms, TMS, CMM, CMS. But now, as we get here, last year I went to Zoomtopia, and they use the term drinking the Kool-Aid. Well, I would say that I drank the Kool-Aid, and
I would say so from your background.
Yeah, but let me explain something. I live and breathe technology. I'm highly technical in what I do. I'm also a professor, but I find that most technology doesn't wow me. Like I see feature upgrades and you're like, okay, well, that's kind of cool, but it's incremental changes. And then when I came in contact with Zoom, it literally like changed my life, because they really have thought about a lot of things that other products were missing. I've used WebEx forever, and that was my platform of choice. But I did feel towards the end that there were features of WebEx even that I was like, I wish they would change the way you shared a screen, because some of our professors might be a little bit older, so they're not highly technical, and you have to walk them through downloading plugins and all this thing. So that frictionless setup of Zoom was very important. Fast forward it to November, we did a proof of concept with Zoom Rooms, and then we did a proof of concept with Zoom Phone, and then our CIO signed the site license for Zoom for the entire university. And it literally changed my life, because the way that I support people, then we started implementing it with all of our meetings went to Zoom, then we started using the chat feature, and then now let's move to March, or actually end of February, March, when COVID-19 came. Our hair was on fire. It's like, what are we going to do? And I simply said, Zoom. We're going to use Zoom. We already have it, so let's teach you how to use it. And our plans were to not roll Zoom out until April for the whole university. And of course, that happened a little faster than we expected it, but we've been doing weekly student town halls with different groups of students, asking them how things are going. And the constant thing that I'm hearing is Zoom is working well. We have to work through exam issues and proctoring issues because everything's done in a virtual environment. But just today, we had a virtual comprehensive exam in pharmacy where we used Zoom to proctor 130 students with about 20 proctors, and we used the breakout room feature, and it worked like a champ. So I'll call that use case 515, right? It's another use case. And then a professor called me today and he said, Jason, we normally do an oath and hooding ceremony at the end of the semester, but we're not going to be able to do it. Can we do it virtually? I said, absolutely. Let's use Zoom. We'll use the webinar feature so the parents can come in, but they're only spectators, so we don't want them to be seen or heard. And then everyone else is a participant, and we're going to play music, and it's going to be very official. But in times like these, you have to be innovative and creative, but luckily this platform makes it all happen.
I think it's interesting you point out the breakout rooms. That's the most exciting part to me recently, in that I go back to Malcolm Gladwell in his book Tipping Point, talks about human dynamics and our comprehension of numbers of people in a group, and that once we get to the lecture hall levels, it's hard to really feel connected to people. And even when you get down to 30 or so, it's not easy for you to open up, share, get interaction. But when you get to breakout groups, that's where our minds are able to comprehend, I have 7 others to relate to. And we can all create an exchange of ideas, or even be able to say, I'm not sure I get this. Anybody else not get this? So it's interesting to see you deploy that type of application in that proctoring. Have you seen some changes, that whole idea of perhaps a TA on demand? Are you seeing anything in terms of outside of the scheduled areas where you're bringing it into teaching support? Not so much. You've said that some of your faculty call ticketing is lower because it seems like they've internalized it faster than other systems. Yeah. What are you seeing in the way of other teaching aid, anything like that, or planning?
Well, the thing that we're doing is with all of our meetings, we'll book an alternative host, right? So a lot of times we either have people join, or especially on the IT side, we'll have people join to help facilitate that. For example, right before my conversation with you, the College of Law had a faculty meeting, and I was in there more of a moderator support. So I was helping people come in, facilitating the raising of the hands, manning the chat while the dean kind of spoke, and it wasn't distracting to her to represent that. We've also had times where faculty doesn't necessarily have a TA in the meeting, but they might need help. So what they do is they'll send a text and they'll jump in, and then they'll help start, almost like a program assistant. They'll start solving problems in the meeting, because at the end of the day, let's be honest, the biggest thing here is the student experience, right? So when you take a student that's traditionally face-to-face, and then you thrust them into a virtual environment, not by choice, but by nature of this virus, I think what you find is we have to be resilient, we have to be understanding, we have to be kind, and we have to work with our students to meet them, in the middle, and make this work for them and be somewhat accommodating to their needs.
Does this new virtual environment present any changes in pedagogy in terms of, you're mentioning some personalization to it? Anything else that you're starting to see, or individuals getting creative, or what's your take?
So the one thing that we're trying to do on a daily basis now is we ask faculty that if they notice something they would consider a best practice, to email it to a specific group of people, and then we share that with the faculty. That best practice could be a change in pedagogy, like you mentioned, because they're learning ways to engage students in a different way. From settings in Zoom, because we've heard of some recent security issues, which I think that's somewhat over sensationalized in the news, because I don't think it's to the point that they really make it out to be. And I've done a lot of testing on the security side, but we have educated them even on settings like locking the meetings and waiting rooms and passwords and stop participant sharing to prevent the Zoom bombing feature. So again, when those things come out, we're really meeting with our leadership team every day so that we can share out that information and get it to them on day one, and they implement it immediately. So I would say we're probably ahead of the curve on how all this is working. And again, the student perspective matters. So we're hearing from students that say, I wish this would happen. I wish recordings were posted a little bit faster. So we are having to meet with faculty and say, hey, we need to make sure we do these things so that, because FAMU has kind of gathered a new approach, and we'll call it a student-centered approach. So in this whole time frame, everything that we do is for the student to make that experience better, because we don't know the future, right? We don't know if in May we're going back to work or if we're going to extend this through the summer. But I truly think that this virus has forever changed the landscape to make it where we now realize that we can work from home, we can teach from home, and we can teach online if needed be.
Perhaps because we're forced into a new method of connecting, that it'll be more engaging. In other words, we'll think of perhaps different ways to involve the student, or perhaps even trying to take some old methods, whether it is the classic blackboard or other instances, and how to bring that into it so that now not only can you write on the blackboard, but now the student can write next to you in exercises and things like that. I do think it's a new day, like you're saying. Have you seen anything? Gaming is, esports and that sort of thing is coming in, but I'm not really going down that road as much as the effect of gaming and gaming mentality of younger students in teaching and this virtual connectedness. Do you see anything, even if it's possibilities for that?
Yeah, I think that, a lot of times we have to realize that we don't always know the best way that students learn. Again, we have professors from different areas of time, meaning like you have young professors in their 20s, you have professors in their 60s and 70s, and everyone has a different teaching style. But I think that the one thing that we can agree on is saying that the way that I've always done it is not the best approach to this. And so we're teaching some older faculty that used to, writing on a whiteboard, and they like that approach, how to digitize that.
Yeah.
When you come to the gaming side of things, I think that we have done some applications where they have some learning modules where, in a sense, it's like playing a game to get to the answer, and they're learning at the same time as they're playing the game. I see that very heavily even with my own children, who are all thrusted in an online environment too, where a lot of that content that's already there, they started that, I believe, like 2 weeks ago, and they're adapting well to that, and they actually like that. So in a sense, it's kind of like homeschooling them, but they like that aspect of it. And then the other thing too is there are a lot of engaging exercises that we're starting to do with the students, and yes, that does modify your pedagogical style, but by doing that, they find that the students are learning. For example, one thing that we do is we now require our students to be on camera the entire time they're in class. If they're not, they could be marked as absent. And in pharmacy, that's important because we actually have an attendance policy, so you have to be there. But again, we believe if you turn your camera off, kind of like this, if I turn my camera off and there's a headshot, am I really there? Am I letting you talk and I might be having lunch and not even paying attention? So that engagement is important to make sure that the students are having knowledge transfer.
Mm-hmm. So what do you do in the event of a repository for video? Did you have a standard approach to online recordings, and how is Zoom in your workflow? That's kind of what I'm getting at in terms of using Zoom in classroom environment and otherwise. How does that come into the general archiving and retrieval?
Well, prior to COVID-19, because we were teaching over Cisco, we recorded every call, every class, and the approach that we had with that is that the professor would walk in. Let's say your class is from 12 to 12:50. You'd walk in, it would automatically connect, it would automatically record, so it doesn't get in the way of their teaching, and they would teach. At the point that that call is over, it would transcode the video, and then it would upload it to VBrick, which was the standard that we chose, which is an online media server. and they would watch all their videos. And what I found is a lot of our students, even if they're in class all day, they'll go back and rewatch the lectures at night.
Mm-hmm.
And before they study, they for an exam, they rewatch the lectures. Now, fast forward to Zoom. The one thing that I still want to see with Zoom is to have an API with VBrick, so that when videos are done, we can create a workflow where they automatically go to VBrick. So right now, instead of doing that, they're held in the Zoom portal. But the one thing that Zoom allows that Cisco did not automatically is the auto transcription feature. And I think that's key too, because students are now using keyword searches to find content. So for example, if the professor said the word diuretic and they're studying diuretics for an exam, they don't have to watch the whole video again. They can skip to that segment in time and then start the video at that point.
Have you seen, you also have word search in some of the basic summary of all meetings that you've had. You have that same AI-ness within that. Have you seen how we might be able to search more than just that one particular session, word search that transcription, and go beyond into, there was something that the professor was talking about 2 months ago when I started this course. I'd like to go back to that. In other words, there's another global approach to searching.
And what you're saying kind of makes me think of features on certain programs where you can do like a multi-file search, keyword search to find information. I don't think that necessarily exists now, but I think you just found a feature that's kind of what. Actually, no, I'm serious. I think you might have presented a feature that has a lot of merit, because again, if I'm studying 2 weeks of lectures and I want to see every video that said the word diuretic and I want to be taken to those access points in the video, I think that's perfect. But I don't know that exists now. I mentioned Zoe Meet before, so I have been testing that product, and what's nice about that product is they're allowing people to use it for free during this time frame. So basically what you do is, if we're in a Zoom meeting, we can go to the website and add the meeting ID to Zoe Meet, and then from there it'll add a user to the call, and then it will transcribe everything live. It actually will transcribe into 3 languages, which is really neat. And then when the video's done and you go back to your Zoe Meet portal, and let's say we click on this catching up for the first time, then what happens is it does triggers. So it will highlight segments of the text where we might have said the word action plan or certain keywords that I want to use as a note, and then I can take that and formulate it and use it almost a minute of a meeting if I needed to do that. So that's a neat AI feature as well.
I think it's pretty cool to see you on the forefront of this. There's many educational technologists who think very forwardly in some of these ways, and I think it's really going to change the bricks and mortar aspect of the university and open up. When you just mentioned multilingual, well, suddenly, AM Florida could be instantly accessible and relevant to somebody who's studying from any particular end of the world. Really presents a lot of opportunity.
Yeah, we have investigated, especially on the pharmacy side, talking to other countries like African countries, the Dominican Republic, different segments. But again, you have the language barrier, right? So we saw at Zoomtopia where Zoom is launching where you can have live transcription. So you could have the professor in Tallahassee speaking English, and then you could translate into other languages. And again, expand your footprint, but without the brick and mortar, and teach pharmacy or any subject, to other subsections of populations that speak different languages.
Yeah, it's a scary time, and in an odd way, to hear you talk, it's in the same way that I'm translating. There is still faith in future, and in fact, those futures are coming to us quicker because of the level of rallying that we're having to do right now. Maybe some old things are dying faster than the curve they were on the downward slope of anyway. but in the end, it's really gave us a chance to recalibrate. Any other thoughts on what you're going through at this point?
Well, I've always said that when you implement technology, it should drive business. And if it's not driving business, then you shouldn't be using it. You're wasting your money on that technology. So what we're finding is with the right technology and the right training and approach, technology is honestly saving the day at this point. And something you said earlier that I really find keen is that we are forever changing the landscape, because working from home, teaching from home, learning from a distance. I got my master's at Florida State in an online program, mainly because I didn't have time to go at night and weekends away from my family to get my master's.
Mm-hmm.
I'm getting my doctorate right now. I graduated in December. That's in an online environment. Guess what we use every single day? We use Zoom for the teaching. And I feel like I'm in the class with all those other people. Yes, they're all spread out all through the state of Florida, but at the same time, we talk in a live environment. We're getting away from this asynchronous type of learning where you read and you do an assignment and you're disconnected from the professor, except if you have a problem or a question. I think that we need to live in a synchronous environment, and people need to stop turning their cameras off, because if you're in a class, you can't turn your face off, right? You're there. So let's be live. Let's see each other, because I put a face with a name. We have inflection. You understand what I mean when I say something. You have a lot of nonverbals that can be used. But yeah, at the end of the day, I think that it's an exciting time, because even though that COVID-19 has created a lot of tragedy, a lot of death, I think what we're going to do when we come out of this is come out with a better world, a more technological world. And I think people are realizing how important technology can be. And I'd like to be part of that process along the way.
I can tell you a lot of people poo-poo technology and sometimes think that it's dehumanizing, but I think Zoom and this virtual connected world that we're now somewhat forced into is enhancing the human-to-human experience. In fact, when it comes to AI, people, even in my tech side of the business, tend to get leery of it. And I go, no, it's about not artificialness. It's about augmenting a human experience. You know what I mean? And I'll go back to kind of conclude that a fellow who is the head of an architectural organization, society, said to me at Enterprise Connect, I think it was in the Aisleway. We had a great conversation just like this. And he says, it's not what technology does for you, it's what technology does to you. And I'm really happy to hear the reporting. And I had a sense that it was going to be this kind of enlightened viewpoint towards, really what is it now doing to the folks in the educational sphere. So I really like you taking the opportunity to get to know me, and allowing me to get to know you a little better.
Yeah, Bill, I've been wanting to talk to you for quite some time. I'm glad that we get a chance to connect. And I think I had another vendor mention this to me recently, where and I'm welcoming more of this, but it was more like a technological interview where we can pose questions and talk about technology, either from a vendor perspective or in this aspect with almost a Q&A session. I do appreciate you taking the time to do this, and I really like the type of questions that you've asked. It kind of creates a lot of forward thinking.
I think a lot of times, you probably know, if you go to an EDUCAUSE or you go to any event, sometimes they're training events and what have you, that the cocktail hour or the breaks, they all have this dynamic that that's when the lights start going on for me in some of those situations. So yeah, I think I'd like to help you stir that up that much more. So let's talk about doing that.
Yeah, if you have some ideas in the future, I'd be welcome to chat some more, and we could bring in other people and kind of have like a roundtable discussion and things of that nature too.
Excellent. Cool.